Every year, tens of thousands of agricultural workers come to this province to plant, tend, and harvest crops on farms across Ontario. In 2013, almost 100 of them were subject to DNA testing by the OPP as part of a sexual assault investigation. That is now the subject of a complaint before the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario. Ashley Okwuosa is TVO's diversity and inclusion reporter. She's been looking into that story and joins us now in studio. Hello, Ashley.
Hi, Jan. How are you?
Not too bad. It's great to have you in studio.
Thank you.
So let's talk about this case. It stems from a 2013 sexual assault investigation. Catch us up on sort of what we need to know about that case.
Yeah, so in October of 2013, a woman in Bam, Ontario was raped, and as part of the Ontario Provincial Police investigation into the assault, 96 migrant farm workers in the surrounding area were asked to submit DNA samples, right? And the OPP eventually found and arrested the assailant, who was a migrant farm worker named Henry Cooper. But the case before the tribunal now actually looks at 54 of those migrant farm workers are saying that they were kind of targeted and discriminated against because of their race and their work status. And I think what's kind of interesting about this particular case is that the victim actually provided, a description of, of the assailant, and I think the description had the assailant at about 20 years old, muscular, between, I want to say like 5'10" and 6 feet tall. But, of the 96 migrant farm workers who provided samples, their ages range from 22 to 68. Their heights range from 5'2" to 6'6", and their weight ranged really widely. So I think that what is kind of being brought before the tribunal now is that these workers were targeted simply because of their race and the fact that they were migrant farm workers.
Some may argue that this particular case needed to be acted on quickly, that time was of the essence. So how does this sort of constitute systemic racial discrimination when we look at this particular case?
Yeah, and I think you are right. That's the argument that the OPP is making, that time was of the essence. But I think also the legal team sort of defending these migrant workers are saying that these DNA sweeps should not be conducted on the basis of race alone. Other things should be taken into consideration. To have such a wide, swath of people who were asked to provide samples, that kind of, then calls into question, how targeted, this approach was.
All right, so I want to look at a photo.
Yeah.
And this particular photo is of a migrant worker. He's holding up a sign that's covering his face, and it says, "I'm 44 years old, and this does not match the description of someone in their early 20s. I feel discriminated, and I hope it doesn't happen again." You spoke to some of the claimants. What are they saying about sort of why they're testifying?
Yeah, so I spoke to, sort of one claimant called Dwayne Henry, who was a migrant farm worker. He isn't anymore. And it was really interesting speaking to him because he mentioned that he didn't know that this was a violation, or it didn't occur to him that this could be a violation until he realized that, of the description provided of this assailant, the assailant didn't have dreadlocks, and he actually has really long dreadlocks. So it then began to occur to him, why am I being targeted? And, and I did ask him why he provided a DNA sample, and he said that he couldn't risk being, asked to leave his job for not doing so, for some kind of insubordination. So, this is his livelihood, and it was kind of important for him to, do as he was told.
All right, let's talk about the OPP. Obviously, they had done the initial investigation. Mm-hmm. Have you had any communication with the OPP so far on the issue?
Yes, so I reached out to the OPP for comment, and they said that it would be inappropriate to provide comment at this time because the hearing is still ongoing. But, I did attend the hearing on Monday, and, the lawyer actually representing the OPP did mention that, like you said, time was of the essence. And, this DNA canvassing was actually crucial, in finding the assailant. And, I think one point that they are trying to make very strongly is that farm workers provided this, of their own volition. They gave consent to provide these samples, so they weren't being forced to in some way.
54. You had mentioned 54 of the 96 workers who were swabbed are at this hearing. So I want to ask you, about the vulnerability of foreign agricultural workers. What are sort of the obstacles for them to sort of come forward in something like this, and repercussions afterwards?
Yeah, I think so. These are, migrant farm workers who are part of a seasonal agricultural worker program. They come from countries in the Caribbean and Mexico. They come to Canada 8 to 9 months out of the year, season after season. And, I think it kind of, one of the things that experts really brought up for me is that it goes back to that question of consent, right? Look at their immigration status. It's usually tied to their work, to their employer. So, it's kind of they're contractually bound to their employer in that way. Their employer provides housing, so there's a level of, indebtedness or control, I think, that, migrant workers seem to have with their employer. So also some of the vulnerabilities that came out actually were very much highlighted during COVID, because if an employer is providing housing, reporters were actually finding that some of these housing or these accommodations were not up to par, they were cramped. So these are workers who are living in Canada 8 to 9 months out of the year. There often isn't really a pathway to permanent residency for them. And also because of this tied work permit, their employer is kind of able to fire them at their discretion. Like the employer is able to say, I don't want you to return, next season, and that's kind of all that they can do, and they're repatriated back to their home country. So I feel like there isn't a lot of, the argument here is that there really isn't a lot of flexibility, there isn't a lot of freedom, and they don't really have a lot of rights.
I am curious about, what being part of sort of that initial swab actually has, when they go back home. Mm-hmm. Is this something that has been carried on them throughout sort of the last couple of years?
I think that some of them have actually said that it has. I read somewhere that Dwayne had actually said that, it has followed him. But what really stuck out to me was there was a witness statement submitted as part of the hearing from, actually the lead applicant. His name is Leon Logan. And he mentioned that really that experience really made him feel humiliated and really just made him feel sad. And I think it kind of goes back to that question of agency, right? Of feeling like, yes, I've been asked to do this, and I guess I can say no, but can I really say no? I think that that's kind of what he was trying to get at, and a lot of the migrant farm workers are trying to get at.
Is there anyone you spoke to that sort of can help predict if change might come out of this? I know a number of organizations had come up and sort of brought this to the forefront. What are they saying? This is, I believe, the first case in Canada like this, mm-hmm. Where we're talking about migrant workers. Is there something going to happen out of this?
Yeah, so I spoke to Shane Martinez, the lawyer, and Chris Ramstroop from Justice for Migrant Workers, and Chris has kind of been advocating on behalf of these workers, for the duration of this process. And I think one of the things that they're pointing out is, one, they're just hoping that DNA sweeps like this are not conducted on the basis of race alone, and they're actually kind of maybe also want to bring to light the vulnerabilities or the unique vulnerabilities of these workers who are, when it comes to race and immigration status, a lot of these workers end up, in rural parts of the province, where they're maybe not a lot of people of color, or where racial tensions can be a little bit different than they are in like a major city like Toronto. So I think it's really important for this organization. What they're doing is really trying to highlight those vulnerabilities that the workers face.
Well, I know you'll keep a close eye on that, and we look forward to seeing that. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jan.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.